Well, greetings viewers, it's Uncle Doug and Jack with a kind of unusual project today. Instead of a vintage tube amp, I thought it might be interesting to feature an ancient piece of laboratory equipment that I picked up fairly recently at an antique shop here in town that specializes in stuff like this. It's called a Strobotac. Now, what we'll do is take a look at the outside, the inside, the schematic, and then we'll do some just hair-raising experiments with this beast. If that sounds interesting, stay tuned. Just as a general introduction to this device, it was probably made in the late 30s or 1940s. It uses 3 vacuum tubes, which is why I liked it. And it's actually a very precise instrument. I think you'll get a kick out of the circuitry because there's certain parts of it you're going to recognize from amplifier circuitry. So let's proceed. We'll look at all the controls and see how it works. Then we'll check the schematic. First, we'll look at the business end of this device, and we see that it consists of a very large and really nice shiny reflector with the tip of a vacuum tube protruding through the rear of the reflector. Now, I never knew this, but a model 631-P1 tube, which is what you're looking at right here, when properly energized, will strobe. So this is our strobe light source, a vacuum tube, an unusual one. Down there at the bottom, we see this leaf. Now, the leaf is for calibrating purposes. It's going to oscillate back and forth at 3,600 beats per minute. Why? Because it is operated off of an electromagnetic coil that is connected to wall current. And the polarity of the coil is going to change 60 times per second, which is going to make the little leaf beat at 3,600 beats per minute. We're going to use that to calibrate the strobe, as you will see shortly. This big knob is the way that we will change the speed of the strobe to match the rotational velocity of whatever it is that we're studying. And you'll see that up here we have a high and low range for RPMs. And also these are just 2-digit numbers. We have to multiply by 100. Now there's the high scales over here, low scales here, and it's backlit because it's best to use this device in the dark, so you have to be able to take your readings. So we have a small Mazda bulb underneath here that will give us some glow so that we can read it. And the lower knob here turns on the device, and also we can set it to either a low speed reading or high speed reading. These other settings are not really for us to use because they require other equipment that I don't have. You can trigger this with an external source, or you can operate a much larger strobe light externally if you wish. Down here at the bottom are the 2 little calibration adjusters. We will do a low and high speed calibration in a few minutes. On this side we have the name tag, Strobotac, made by General Radio Company, not corporation, and they're located in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I wonder how many of these they sold to MIT. Operating instructions and calibrating instructions right here on the back of the instrument. You don't really need to drag out your operating manual, which is still available on the internet, I'm glad to say. I downloaded it and made a copy for myself so that I could double check this thing and see how to operate it. Down below here we turn on that read, remember up at the front under this strobe tube, so that we can calibrate it. This turns the read on and off. This is the external feed for the larger strobe light if we want to use it. This is for the external trigger. We have something called direct and slow toggling here, which I'll explain in just a second. And over here, of course, is the male part where we plug in the female part of our cord, our power cord. 3-wire too, you notice, grounded, which is nice. When the toggle is in direct position, you can use the large speed control knob here to vary the strobe rate from 60 all the way up to 14,400 flashes per minute. When the toggle is in the slow position and the lower knob is in the low position, then using the speed control knob, you can adjust the flash rate from 60 to 360 flashes per minute. If the lower knob is in the high position, we can now adjust the strobe rate from 240 up to 1,440 RPM. So as you can see, when we're in the slow mode with the toggle switch on the back, we will use the instrument then to measure speeds that are about 1/10 what we would measure if it was in the direct position. So direct is for high speed measurements, slow is for low speed measurements. Since all of that is utterly confusing, I made a quick chart here to show, depending on the toggle position, direct or slow, and the knob position, low or high, we have 3 different speed ranges. All right, I pulled off the metal cover. Let's take a look inside. As you can see, it's rather complex. And here are 2 things that should look very familiar to any tube amplifier addict. How about a 6N7? We know this is a duo triode tube, often used in guitar amplifiers. In fact, a couple of the amps I just worked on use 6N7s. The other tube here is a 6X5, which is a very common rectifier tube with a 6-volt filament instead of the 5-volt filament like in the 5Y3. We see this in a lot of sort of medium to low power guitar amplifiers. On your right, notice the big stack of mica capacitors and 2 fuses, also carbon comp resistors, and really nice, neat wiring. Notice the twisting there of the wires. See, that isn't just reserved for audio circuits. Now looking down from above, we can see our speed readout wheel with its 2 ranges, high and low. And then way back underneath here, we can see that little Mazda 6-volt bulb that will illuminate the readings so we can see them in the dark. Next, we'll come over here to the rear 2/3 of that 631 strobe tube. It says General Radio Type 631, made by Sylvania. God only knows what those cost. I'm sure it's more now than it was back then. Here we can see that little leaf that we use for calibration purposes, and if we look underneath here we can see exactly how it works. One end is anchored here, I guess so that you can replace the leaf if it wears in the middle here and breaks. But look, a coil here that is connected to the wall current, and therefore the polarity in the coil will vary 60 times per second, which will attract the leaf and repel the leaf at exactly the same rate. So the little leaf is going to vibrate back and forth 60 times per second, or 3,600 times per minute. And we will use it here because this will strobe on the leaf. We can use it then to calibrate the rate of the strobe. Other structures of interest here in the bottom view would be the power transformer, which is nicely coated, probably with a water-resistant material to keep moisture from harming it. And over here is that stack of ultra-precise Aerovox capacitors that are used to control the oscillator that is the key to this, how this unit operates. That should ring a bell with those of you who like tremolos that use low-frequency oscillators that are like 2 or 3 cycles per second. We saw that this one goes up to a much higher cyclic rate, but the general theory is going to be the same. We'll see that in greater detail when we look at the schematic. There's some world-class can electrolytics here. This one could double as a hot water heater, I think, in the off-season. But all in all, a very, very interesting device, very elaborate. So let's take a look at the schematic and see, surprisingly, in what ways it is similar to a guitar. Uh-oh, look who's up here giving the sniff test. Yes, the Strobotac is getting a good workout here. What do you think, Jackie? Good stuff, huh? Even the screwdriver's good. Schematic, Thanks, Jack. Okay, here's the schematic. As you can see, it's on page 20 of the operating manual for the General Radio Company Strobotac. You can take a look at that manual if you'd like, download it, or maybe just download the schematic for your own review. Let's take a look here. Then we start up here at the top, of course, where the primary is for the power supply. If you notice, here is our 6x5 rectifier tube, and we have a series of filter capacitors. This much right here could probably work for a regular audio amplifier if you wanted. As you can see, power supplies are pretty much universal in tube electronic devices. And down here is the mighty Strobotac 631 tube. You have to have a very special light source when you're going to strobe, because like an incandescent light, if you were to apply power to it and then take power away, there would be a glow up until full brightness and then a glow as the brightness diminishes, which wouldn't give you that sharp, clear-cut strobing that you want. So this Strobotac apparently is able to flash on and flash off instantaneously, as fast as 14,400 times per minute. So that makes it a very special tube indeed. I think other devices, more modern ones, would use a neon bulb of some sort for this purpose. But regardless, the tube is triggered by our oscillator down here, which uses one of the triodes of a 6 and 7 tube. You can see the capacitance loops that connect the plate and the grid. So as the plate output comes around, it goes through the capacitance and comes back into the grid so that it oscillates at a speed that is varied by these speed controls that we use up, that great big handle that we turn to vary the speed control dials at the top. We'll then vary the rate of oscillation of this tube and vary the triggering of the mighty Strobotac. A few other little tidbits. We look over here and see the electromagnet for the reed, and that it is pre-rectifier because we want AC at 60 cycles per second to operate the leaf and make it wiggle so that we can use it for calibration purposes. Here is that Mazda bulb that lies underneath our calibration readout wheels to backlight them. And I guess couple other things. When we do adjust the calibration of the device, this is the potentiometer for the 900 range, and this is going to be the potentiometer for the 3600 range. I'm not going to go into any greater detail on this. For those of you who want to know more about it, just download this schematic and study it to your heart's content. But I think it's time now that we move on from discussing the device into actually operating. You know, the last time I saw Jack, he was on the back porch, but he seems to have disappeared. I can't find him anywhere. Okay, here we are in a pitch dark workshop surrounded by all sorts of sharp objects and dangerous hand tools. So what could go wrong? Okay, well, I think we'll probably find out. Okay, let's perform the calibration procedure. We're going to set the slow wheel here at 36 times 100 is 3,600 cycles per minute, which is exactly the speed that the leaf should be oscillating at since it is synchronized with the 60 cycle wall current. Okay, I've turned the little reed on, and we're going to see if it's absolutely stationary due to the strobe light being synchronized with it and stopping its motion. We look inside here, and the little reed is wiggling a bit. So that means we've got to adjust on the side with our screwdriver. So I'm going to use my trusty screwdriver here in the adjustment screw on the side. Isn't that weird? It looks like it's just barely moving back and forth, and it's going 3,600 vibrations per minute. Okay, let me see if I can slow it down any. There we go. I think that's pretty close. There it is. I think it stopped. Okay, we're calibrated. Next we'll do the low speed calibration. I set the slow wheel to 9 times 100 is 900. And then we look in here at the little leaf, and it's just wiggling up a storm. So let's try to stop it or slow it down. There we go. Getting all kinds of weird flashes here. I say that's... The camera's having a hard time with this, as you can imagine, but that looks pretty stationary. Okay, I've got a drill bit in the drill press, and we're strobing now at a real high rate. Let me turn on the drill, and let's get a look at some of the weird optical effects you can get with a strobe light like this. First off, I can stop it, and now watch, I'll make it go backwards. Okay, let me stop it again. I'm going to show you something that I find to be really kind of spooky. Okay, it looks like it's been turned off, doesn't it? Well, let's drill a hole with a drill press that's turned off. It almost looks like I'm just pushing the drill through the wood, but as you can see, when I unsynchronize the light, that drill really is spinning. Now, if you couldn't actually hear the drill press running, you might think that bit was standing still and the drill was off. Let's see what happens when I touch it with a stick. As you can see, that drill bit is not stationary. And it appears that the rotational speed of the drill press is about 830 RPM. Okay, our next experiment's kind of noisy, but it was set up by Jack, and he took an electric drill back here and put it into a vise with a white disc spinning at high speed. And he said that he put a secret message on the disc. So let's see if we can stop the disc with the strobe light and read the message. Oh my Lord. I can make it go frontwards, backwards, or stop it wherever I want it. Oh, that Jack, he's still hooked. Now let's use the strobe to measure the rotational speed of the drill. We stop its motion, and then we look down here at the low speed dial on the right. Let the camera adapt to the bright light, and it's a little less than 11. Times 100 means that the drill is rotating at a little less than 1100 RPM. I'm afraid this next experiment is going to be even noisier, so I'd better explain it to you before I start so you can actually hear what I'm saying. It's my intention to start my angle grinder here it'll probably run at a little over 10,000 RPM with a brand new disc. Now what I'm wondering is, can this strobe light stop the motion of the disc at 10,000 RPM so we can actually read what's on the disc? Okay, now I'll be in the dark with a running cutoff wheel, so all sorts of things can go wrong, so keep your fingers crossed, and 911 on speed dial. Okay, here we go. Okay, here we go. Yeah, I got the strobe synchronized so it stopped it. Now let's touch a piece of steel to that seemingly stationary blade and see what happens. Notice that it slows down when the steel hits it, and it comes out of synchrony with the strobe light. And if you're wondering about the rotational speed of the cutoff wheel, we're using the high reading here. It's 112 with 2 zeros would be 11,200 RPM. And according to Makita, it's good for 10,000 RPM, so this one's outdoing itself. Also on the disc, they give you a rating, maximum RPM, and this one's 13.3. So we're a little safe at 11.2. Odds are I won't be decapitated anytime soon by a shattered cutoff wheel. Also, it's kind of interesting that at this high strobe rate of 11,200 flashes per minute, the light just appears to be steadily on. You cannot see any flashing. Okay, for one last trick, let's drill another hole in the 2x4 with a seemingly stationary drill bit. Okay, the strobe has stopped the rotation. Let's start drilling. Isn't that weird? It's like it's just pushing through the wood. Well, I guess that's about it for today's expose on the weird and interesting Strobotac 631. I'm going to anticipate a viewer question and try to answer it here instead of answering it like 9 or 10 times in the comments section. And I anticipate the question being, I understand how the little leaf at the bottom here can be used to calibrate at 3600, but how did the same leaf that was vibrating at the same speed get used to calibrate at 900 flashes per minute? The reason is that the leaf at 3600 vibrations per minute can be used to calibrate at any even fraction of that vibration rate. In other words, 1/2, it could calibrate to 1800. 1/4, it can calibrate to 900. 1/8, it would be good for 450 vibrations per minute. Now, let's explain why that's true. Okay, for this wonderful demo, this is going to be the little reed or leaf moving back and forth, and this is going to be the strobe flashing. Let's have the little leaf going 3600 vibrations per minute, and the strobe is at exactly the same speed. Strobe, 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 strobe. Notice every time that it strobes, the leaf is in the far left position. Because that's when the light hits it, that's the only place we're going to see it. We won't see it because it's in the dark on the rest of its travels. But right here, when the strobe comes on, it will be seen on the far left side of its travel. Now we're going to have the leaf going 3600, but we're going to have the strobe at 900 like it was during our calibration. Ready? Here goes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Strobe. 1, 2, 3, 4. Strobe. So the only time we see it is on the left side of its travel. It really doesn't matter that it made 4 trips. All we're seeing is the leaf over here. So it's useful for the 900 vibrations per minute calibration for that reason. Now granted, when you're at 3600, you're going to get a clearer, sharper image because you're going to see the leaf 4 times more often than if you're just at the 900 calibration point. Remember that the leaf, what it looked like at 3600, it was much clearer than it was at 900. So that's how it works, okay? I wanted to take a second or two to thank all the new patrons that signed up since the last video on Patreon, and also the people who made PayPal contributions. Jack and I really appreciate it, and we're going to use it to buy that catnip that he demanded during experiment number 2. There will be links for both types of donation in the video description. Okay, enough of all this jabber. Let's go back to the car show and check out a bunch more hot rods. How about this for the old school T-bucket? The brass radiator shell. It looks like a Ford engine. Distributor in the front. Bus steering. Kind of modest rear tires. Look at that. I had one of these years ago, and I want to tell you that up at about 70 miles an hour, things get real exciting. And it's the kind of excitement I could probably do without. Anyway, pretty snazzy. If you like your cars low, I guess this is the one you'd pick. Can't get much lower than that. Obviously an airbag suspension, and it's deflated right now, just like my ego when I look at some of these beautiful cars. Really neat. The shallow bed, now that was necessary because the suspension has to be able to rise up so high that you've got to elevate the bed to cover the rear differential when it's the car's in a down mode like this. A couple things about this that are kind of neat. It's a 460 Ford engine, which no doubt hauls more ass than it has a right to. And look at this. This is, if people like patina, apparently while he was sanding this down, he thought, man, that looks kind of snazzy. It's almost like a marble or agate or something. So he clear coated it. Very unusual. Okay, this thing's incredible. We'll start here with the differential. It's the old Calibration style quick change rear end, which costs a fortune, probably more than some of the cars that are here. And then it's a track T Roadster. Okay, and it is absolutely beautifully done. Just gorgeous. Obviously a fiberglass body. And look at the engine. Talk about understated beauty. You know, not a whole lot of chrome and billet stuff tacked on, just high quality materials and parts. Obviously this guy knows his stuff. Look at that, the full-size moons like you see at the Bonneville racetrack, or salt flats. I like this. Okay, here's one of my all-time favorites. Look at this thing. 5-window coupe, huge rear tires, and you're going to see why in just a minute. Look at the body on this thing. I'm going to tease you a little first. We're going to look inside. Absolutely gorgeous interior. This is where a lot of people come up short. But look at this thing.
No, you can put it.
Not a Crate 350. This is a 409 with 2 4s. The old 409 425 mystery engine back from the early 60s. Gorgeous wheels. As nice as it gets. Once again, a car I think that would be welcome in any car show in the country. Beautifully done from one end to the other. And here we've got kind of the old school type 5-window coupe. Little bit of rust showing down there. And appears to be a, I don't know, it's a 327 or 350. I can't see the harmonic balancer from here, but whichever it is, it's nicely done. The old baby moons on the steel wheels. This is the kind of car you could go and have fun with and not have to worry a whole lot about every minute. It'd still be a lot of fun to drive. Okay, I got to show you this. It belongs to a good friend of mine. It's got the surfboards up on top and the old-fashioned type of camper. But look at the woodwork he did in here. It's all in natural wood. And he's got kind of like a day and night motif. Look at those support ribs up in the top. Looks like a Dr. Seuss construction. Very, just beautifully done. You'll see this truck looks really plain. Look down the side of it here. It's still got rust and some patch panels added in and stuff like that. I've ridden many a mile on this seat. But he's got his hood down, which is a shame. I'll get him to open it a little later. But it's a 350 with 2 4s, and it does get down the road. And he and I both are fans of those 5-spoke American mags. You saw them on my little Model A pickup. Put a board on the front. In the old days at the drag strip, there'd always have to be somebody around with something like this with a board on the front to start the dragsters and the cars that had no starters. So he, with nostalgia in mind, put that on the front of this. And I got Mike to open the hood here on the surf truck. And I told you, the engine's interesting. He modeled it after the engines in the like 1958, 9, 60, 61 Corvette. This is a 350, not a 283, but it's got the aluminum manifold with the two poles. And there goes our friend, the track roadster. I think you heard him go by. How about this for an old school gem? Looks like a 30 Model A coupe, fenderless, like a highboy style, with old-fashioned, sort of narrow, biased ply tires, and dark green and light green contrast with the old-fashioned baby moons and beauty rings. He's even got the rumble seat here. And what's kind of neat about this one is he has a Model A engine inside, but it's got every type of speed accessory, and I wish the hood was open, but he's got the overhead valve head on it and all sorts of really neat early speed equipment. So even though this is a stock 4-cylinder, relatively stock, this thing can keep up with traffic just fine, and he didn't have to install a modern V8 in it. Well, if you like your 57 Chevys red, I guess this is the one for you. Look it down the side, straight as an arrow. Gorgeous wheels. Very tastefully done. Absolutely perfect body from what I can see. And it's a 4-speed as God intended. Beautiful stock interior. What a gem. Kind of a resto rod where it looks just like it did from the factory other than the wheels. And yet, I'll guarantee you that this thing doesn't run like it did from the factory. I'm not sure why everybody has their hoods closed today, but if they open them up later, I'll go around and get some shots inside the engine compartments. This is another car that was built by a friend of mine. It's one of his first cars, and he does some of the most magnificent work you'll ever see in suspension and fabrication and all. He's just a genius. But he sold this, and it's still been in town and shows up at the shows, and it's still in magnificent condition. Beautiful 40 Ford, good healthy tires and wheels. Look at this thing, just straight as an arrow. Hard to see for all the reflections, but absolutely beautiful interior. And trust me, it runs just a little bit better than it looks. This thing just flies. Beautiful car.